installing Microsoft SQL Server 2019 on Windows Server 2019. This tutorial will go over the basic installation of MSSQL Server for those that are beginning their SQL journey. We will be installing the developer version so that you can begin to explore this RDBMS. Open a web browser and search for MSSQL Server 2019 download, or you can use the link in the video description below to direct you to their downloads page. Scrolling down, you will see two editions, the Developer Edition and the Express Edition. Both are free to download and explore. For this tutorial, we will be downloading the Developer Edition. Locate your download and open the SQL 2019-SSEI-dev executable. The Basic option will install your SQL engine with basic features. Custom allows you to select specific features to install. And Download Media will download the entire installation media. By selecting Download Media, you can specify a folder location where you would like the ISO or CAB file to be downloaded. Today we will be selecting the Custom option. Next, specify the location where you would like the media to be installed. By default, it will install to your C drive under a new folder named SQL 2019. Once you downloaded the media, open your File Explorer, locate your SQL 2019 folder, and drill down past developer_enu. Then double-click on setup.exe. The Installation Center will appear displaying a slew of SQL tools and documentation. On the left panel, select Installation. Then click on New SQL Server Standalone Installation or add features to an existing installation. Selecting the drop-down for Specify a Free Edition enables you to select different editions to install. If you have a SQL Server license, select Enter the product key instead and provide your key before clicking Next to proceed. We will be installing the Developer Edition, which doesn't require a license key entry. If you accept the terms by Microsoft, checkmark I accept the license terms and privacy statement, then click Next. This next page is just a summary to identify potential issues before installation. The warning for Windows Firewall is normal and can be addressed at a later time. Click Next. For a basic installation, check mark Database Engine Services under Features. The SQL Client Connectivity SDK should already be checkmarked by default. You can also specify the location where you would like the install of the root directory. If everything is satisfactory, click Next. You can install up to 50 instances on a single Windows server, however it is not recommended. To separate and identify those installations, you can provide an instance name. Since this is the first SQL engine we are installing, I'm not going to include one. Our server engine name will be the same as our Windows server name, which is MyServer. I will show you how to install additional instances later in this tutorial. Leave the selection as default at this time and click Next. This page displays a few service accounts. We will leave everything as default, but I want to take a moment to explain them. SQL Server Agent is a feature for custom and system automation of tasks, which will be manually started unless we change the startup type to automatic. We will leave this alone for now. By default, our database engine will start automatically when our server boots unless we alter the startup type. SQL Server Browser is a feature that listens to incoming requests for resources and provides info about your database. By default, this is disabled. If we select the Correlation tab, we can select properties for sorting rules, case and accent sensitivity for your database engine. For today, we will be focusing on the default selection, SQL Latin 1 General CP1 CIAS. Latin 1 is basically ASCII character encoding format. CI stands for case insensitive. Comparison between capital letters and lowercase letters are ignored. AS stands for accent sensitive. For example, the word cafe with an accent on the E. The accent is taken into consideration for comparison. If you want your database to be case sensitive, select the option with CS. If you want your database to be case insensitive, select the option with CI. For accent sensitive, choose AS. And for accent insensitive, select AI. For this installation tutorial, we're just going to leave this as default. This next window presents the security options to connect to your database engine. Windows Authenticated Mode will leverage your Windows user profile account to connect. Mixed Mode provides you the option to connect with a SQL authenticated user as well as your Windows authenticated user account. The Windows authenticated account is the Windows user profile you are currently signed into. For this tutorial, we will choose Mixed Mode. Provide a password for the default admin SQL authenticated user account created during installation. Then click Add Current User to add your current Windows user account that you are signed into as an administrator as well. Click on the TempDB tab. For best practice, you would want to install the temp database to a separate drive apart from your C drive. Located within your C drive is a virtual memory manager that reads and writes constantly to a file named pagefile.sys. The temp database will continue to grow and grow. If you install temp database on the same drive where your pagefile.sys is located, the pagefile.sys in and out or I/O process will be 8 times greater than normal. For this tutorial, since I don't have another drive currently to relocate the installation, C drive will suffice. Click Next. This is a summary page. If everything is satisfactory, click Install. Once installation is complete, click Close. Wonderful! You have installed SQL Server. Question now is, how do you interact with it? One way is to use a Windows command prompt. Enter the command SQL cmd and then hit enter. Once you see numeral 1 with a greater than symbol, you successfully connected to the master database using your Windows authenticated account. Enter. Select name from sys.sys databases for the first line, then hit enter. On line 2, enter Go and hit enter again to list all the databases currently within your SQL Server engine. There should be 4 of them: Master, TempDB, Model, and MSDB. Enter Exit to exit. You can also interact with PowerShell. Using the same commands, we can also list out the databases within our SQL Server engine. If you require something that's more robust to interact with your database, open your SQL Server Installation Center again, then click Install SQL Server Management Tools, which will open a web browser and direct you to their downloads page. Scroll down and click Free Download for SQL Server Management Studio, SSMS, version 18.12.1 to begin the download. Locate your download and double-click ssms-setup-enu.exe. By default, it will install to your C drive designated unless you change its destination. Click Install to begin. Once complete, locate and open SQL Server Management Studio, which should be under Microsoft SQL Server Tools 18. Your server engine should already be selected. If not, click on the drop-down and click Browse for more. Expand Database Engine and select the engine you would like to connect to. We will connect with our Microsoft account. Click Connect to continue. On the left panel is our Object Explorer. Expand Databases, then expand System Databases to see a list of system databases within our engine. Let's see how we can interact with our engine using all 3 options that I showed you, using Windows Command Prompt, PowerShell, and SQL Server Management Studios, or SSMS. To create a new database in SSMS, let's open up a new query. Type Create Database, then the name of your database. I will name my database as MyFirstDB. Then the next sets of commands determines the logical name, location, and size of our new database and log database. I posted an example of this command in its entirety at the bottom of this video. Type on, left parentheses, name, equals, and then the logical name of your database, which we will name MyFirstDB _dat, encompassed within single quotes for this tutorial. Then type comma, file name equals, and the destination where you would like the .mdf or the main database file to be stored. This file contains all the information within your new database. Typically, the .mdf and the .ldf are stored within your SQL Server root under a folder named Data. If you open up your File Explorer and navigate to C, Program Files, Microsoft SQL Server, MSSQL 15.MSSQL Server, MSSQL, and then Data, you will see .mdf and LDF files for your system databases. For this demonstration, we will store both the .mdf and LDF to a folder I created in the C drive named SQLDB under the file name MyFirstDB _dat.mdf and MyFirstDB _log.ldf respectively. Remember to encompass the destination between single quotes. Next, type comma size equals. This determines the initial size of your database. We will start with 10 megabytes. This does not need to be encompassed between single quotes. Then type comma file growth equals. This determines the incremental size growth once your initial size has been reached. We will configure this to 5 megabytes. Type right parentheses log on left parentheses name equals, and then the logical name of your log database, which we will name MyFirstDb _ log, encompassed within single quotes. Then type comma file name equals, and the destination where you would like the .ldf or transaction logs to be stored. This file contains changes and transactions within your new database. Again, for this demonstration, we will store the .ldf to the same folder I created in the C drive named SQLDB under the file name MyFirstDb _ log.ldf. Again, remember to encompass the destination between single quotes. Next, type comma size equals. This determines the initial size of your log database. We will start with 5 megabytes. This does not need to be encompassed between single quotes. Then type comma file growth equals. This determines the incremental size growth once your initial size has been reached. We will configure this to 5 megabytes. Once you have your command typed out, we can enter F5 on the keyboard to execute the command, or click on the execute button on the ribbon bar. The message should state the commands completed successfully. To validate, right-click the Databases folder within your Object Explorer panel and select Refresh. You should see your very first database listed. To see your database from a Windows command prompt, enter command SQLCMD and enter the commands we used earlier in this tutorial. We should see our new database at the bottom of the list. We can also do the same thing in PowerShell. To create a database in Windows Command Prompt or PowerShell, you will need to be connected to your engine using your SQLCMD command. You can copy and paste the command from SSMS to either the Windows Command Prompt or PowerShell, or you can type out each command line. The only difference is you will need to enter Go at the very end. Here you can see that it failed because there's already a database named MyFirstDb. Within SSMS, you can also create a database using their wizard. Right-click the Databases folder in the Object Explorer panel. Then click New Database. Enter your new database name in the correct field. For this demo, we will enter MySecondDB and configure its logical name, initial size, growth, and file location. For file location, it will install your database to MSSQL's root that I mentioned earlier by default, unless we specify a target location. We will leave everything as default and then click OK. Your second database should now be listed under your Object Explorer panel. If not, try refreshing your databases folder. Let's install another SQL Server engine and how we can distinguish it from our first one named MyServer. Open your installation media again for SQL Server 2019. Once the Installation Center window is displayed, click the Installation option and select New SQL Server, Standalone Installation, or add features to an existing installation. We will follow the exact same steps as earlier, except we will include an instance name. This will help us to determine and identify our server engines. This page reveals the instances of SQL Server that's already installed. We can see that there's already one in existence from our installation earlier. We are going to perform another new installation of SQL Server 2019. Click Next and continue with the same steps as earlier. Okay, here is where we can create an instance name for our second installation. For this demo, I will be naming this instance as Instance 1. Our full server engine name will be MyServer/Instance1 for our second installation. Then continue with the steps as normal. Once installed, let's install a third engine and name it Instance 2. Now that we have 3 engines installed, I want to show you how you can connect to each database as well as the unique SQL instances using Windows Command Prompt, PowerShell, and SSMS. Within SSMS, click on New Query within the ribbon bar. Then click on the drop-down next to the Execute button to select the database we wish to interact with. We can choose from any 4 of the system databases or the 2 we created earlier. To interact with a specific database within Windows Command Prompt, type SQLCMD to connect. Then connect to the first database we created and named MyFirstDb by typing use MyFirstDB within the first line, then go on the second, followed by the Enter key. You should see a message stating you've now changed databases with a numeral 1 and a greater than symbol. You can use the same command in PowerShell. For PowerShell, let's connect to our second database named MySecondDB. Another method within Windows Command Prompt is to specify the database when typing the SQLCMD command. We can include the database name we would like to connect to by adding -d to designate a target database and the database name. Once connected, we should be linked to MyFirstDB instead of our master database. Once again, you can use the same command within PowerShell. Let's create a SQL authenticated user account within SSMS and connect using these credentials. Expand the security folder within your Object Explorer panel and open logins. You should see the default SA account created during installation. You should disable this account once you've already established a separate admin account to enhance security. This is a known SQL authenticated account and it tends to be the target for malicious activity. Right-click Logins and select New Login. Enter a login name. By default, Windows Authentication is selected. Switch this to SQL Server Authentication and enter a password for this user. We can then customize the login preferences for this user. For now, we'll leave everything as default and click OK. Let's disable the SA account, since we already have another admin account. Right-click the SA profile and click Properties. Select Status, and then switch the login option from Enabled to Disabled, then click OK. We are going to refresh our Logins branch, and we should see a red X next to our SA account, indicating that it's been disabled. We are going to disconnect from our current engine and then reconnect again with the new account we created. Click on the plug icon with the red X to disconnect within the Object Explorer panel. Then click Connect and select Database Engine. We will connect to our first engine using the SQL Authenticated account. Switch the authentication mode from Windows Authentication to SQL Authentication. Enter the username and password, then click Connect. You should now be connected to your engine using the SQL Authentication account. The Object Explorer panel should state the engine you are connected to and the user you are signed in as. To do this in a Windows command prompt, connect to your engine using SQL CMD. Then type create login, the name of your login, with password equals, and a strong password encompassed between single quotes. Then type Go on the second line and then enter. To validate, we will exit and clear our prompt window. Type SQL CMD with -U, your username, and then -P with your password without the single quotes, and then the Enter key. Let's exit and disable our SA account. We will need to sign in as an admin account and we'll use our Windows login to do so. Once connected, type Alter, Login, SA, Disable on line 1, then Go on line 2, followed by the Enter key. To validate, let's try signing in using the SA account. you will notice that there's an error message stating that this account has been disabled. Using the same steps, you can also do this in PowerShell. Let's try connecting to a separate SQL Server engine within SSMS. Let's disconnect and open a new connection window. Click on the drop-down for server name and select Browse for more. Expand Database Engine and you should see the additional 2 installed and their named instances. If you want, we can connect to all 3 and have them at your disposal within the Object Explorer. As you expand the database list, you'll notice that each instance will have their own set of system databases, but only our first install will have MyFirst and MySecondDB. To connect using a command prompt, type SQLCMD -S and the engine name. This example connects to my server using MySQL authenticated user. Include the instance name to connect to either instance 1 or instance 2. In this example, this attempts to connect to my server \instance1 with a SQL authenticated account. However, the connection has failed because the account was created for the first engine that we installed and not for instance 1. If we expand the security options within instance 1 and SSMS, we will see that the user is missing. So we will sign in using our Windows account instead. Again, these same steps can be repeated in PowerShell. Thank you for watching. I hope this tutorial has helped guide you on your new beginnings with SQL Server.